We got to dive into the news of the last few days. The tariffs. That's the big thing.
All right.
People are panicking, bro, for no reason.
Now, I do want to give a disclaimer to everyone, just so we can cover our ass here. We're not economists. We are not anywhere near economists. I have a minor in economics from the 20th century, so I know a little something. But we both have common sense, and I think we're going to be talking about here is not necessarily the nuts and bolts of the financial aspect of things, but certainly about the political strategy of that, because we're both adept at discussing that, as well as negotiating.
Everybody got that?
Earlier today, Trump issued a 90-day stay, I guess you would call it, of most of the global tariffs that he was talking about. And his main message to everyone out there, all you Americans watching the show and everybody else in between, just be cool, man.
Well, everybody knew you had to do it, but they never had the guts to do it. It does take guts. It even takes guts for our country to go through it. That's why I say be cool. They were saying about, just be cool. It's going to work out. It's going to work out, and it's working out. I can tell you, working out maybe faster than I thought. But I said it's going to take a little conditioning. It's a transition to. I think it's a transition to greatness. It's going to be greatness. Our country is going to be. There'll be nothing like it, and people investing in our country, they're going to do better than they've ever done before.
A transition to greatness, my friend. What are your thoughts?
So, much like I've said this in the past about Trump, obviously we like Donald Trump, right? I think the man's brilliant. He doesn't always explain things the best. He explains things like a regular person, but then sometimes when it's on the business side of the house, he just assumes, he has the curse of knowledge, where he assumes everyone's tracking along with what he's saying. There's a lot to get into with tariffs, obviously, right? But I just want to start with this one thing. All of the people that have been wrong about damn near everything over the last 20 or 30 years were saying that Trump is about to crash the economy. They actually said it in his first term, too. I trust Trump on this one, okay? This is his forte. If you notice, the rest of his administration is kind of on autopilot. He's got key players leading every, secretary level position, and they're doing, his bidding without him having to micromanage any of them. So he's focusing in on the economy with his economic advisors. I trust the man. I don't trust the people who told us about COVID or global warming or the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't trust those people, right? So I trust Trump. We'll start there.
Okay, let's take a step back in sort of like the 30,000-foot view of things. I want to take it back to just basic concepts of negotiation. Let's talk about that for a moment. The aspects of negotiation that I think maybe people don't realize that they deal with in their everyday life is that you leverage advantages that you can, minimize disadvantages or flaws on your side, and come to an arrangement that absolutely nobody thinks they won completely. What's going on here, in my opinion, and I said this on social media, I'm going to get to a little bit of some back and forth I had with friends of mine who are Republicans, who consider themselves conservative, who don't like what Trump is doing, and we'll use that as sort of the other side of the argument. What Trump is doing here is not about tariffs. It's not about asserting economic dominance over anyone. What it is about is using tariffs as a tool within his negotiation quiver, let's call it, because you have arrows that kept in the quiver and whatever. I know it's an old reference, but go with me on this. He has these tools that he could leverage in order to assert pressure on the other side of the negotiating table, which would be basically the rest of the world, either individually, collectively, whatever group or region they want to talk about. And Trump is showing his commitment and his will to use tariffs if necessary in order to get what he ultimately wants, which is a reset globally of the economic playing field that has been so neglected by decades of American policy and globalization, to be perfectly honest. So in order to get to that reset point, Trump is using what leverage he has, which is the greatest economy known to man, and is trying to use that to create a new paradigm in global trade and global economics. And that's the premise I gave to people. In fact, my words to my friends were, do you get it now? Do you understand that it's not about the tariff themselves and raising money or changing things up in that respect, but it's really about resetting the balance? And what do you think? First of all, what do you think about what I'm saying here? Are you on board with me with this?
I'm only partially on board with Eugene.
Okay.
So I do agree with you. He's using that tool or whatever that, whatever you were saying about
the arrow in the quiver.
Arrows, So yeah, he's using it as a tool, right? But there's a lot more to it. Sometimes it is just about tariffs, right? Trump is a master negotiator. Yes, that's true. If you looked at the chart that he was standing out there talking about a couple of days ago, all of the tariffs or other inequities that are against United States exports into other countries or imports into their countries, our tariff rate was going to be half of whatever theirs was, right? Which was much higher than it used to be, but way lower than what they're charging us. At the end of the day, even if someone went to 0% against us, he was keeping a 10% tariff. And that's why I'm saying sometimes it really is just about tariffs. Trump believes, and so do I, that generating revenue from external sources, other countries, is not necessarily a bad thing. China, when it sells something to us on Temu, the profit margin is like 98% on that Chinese-made good you're buying. If you charge China 100% tariff, now their profit margin is 96% instead of 98%. They're going to eat that tariff, and we're going to generate revenue. So sometimes it is just about tariffs. But at the end of the day, like he said, external revenue service, 10% across the board. We consume roughly 40% of the world's goods. We make up way less than that in the world's population, right? So in order to gain access to our markets, you might have to pay a tariff to get in. I'm not saying it should be 90%, right? Because then you start incrementally increasing prices here. But at 10% off the top, the government gets its VIG. Hopefully that helps us pay down the debt. I'm all right with that.
What's a VIG? Well, you know how gangsters, they talk about a VIG?
It really is like the mafia sometimes. You got to pay the VIG. Sometimes you got to pay an entrance fee at the door. You know, you got to pay the cover charge. But you raise a good point in that the negotiations are not homogenous. There are negotiations with bad actors like China that use slave wage labor and are able to undercut prices in that respect. And then there's, individual countries that you can negotiate with. And then there's regions like the European Union that you have to negotiate with collectively. And even then, some nations have a VAT, some nations don't. So it's not one size fits all, certainly. But I want to address the comments from this friend of mine that was concerned about Trump tariffs. So let me see if I can do this right, because this is a new feature on here. There it is. And I'm going to embiggen my screen so I can see it now. The comment from my friend when I said, do you get it now? This wasn't about tariffs. This was about the market itself. What does that even mean? Trump already rejected 0-for-0 trade deals and never lifted the auto, aluminum, or steel tariffs. Well, he didn't say that he was lifting them all. He was lifting some. What are the 0-for-0 trade deals that this friend of mine is referencing, pal?
I'm lost. I don't know of any country of significance that charges America a zero tariff at all. Who is that person?
Well,
that
didn't Vietnam offer a 0-for-0 trade deal?
They did after we had to tariff them. Vietnam was killing us with tariffs. I forget. It was one of the higher percentages they were charging us.
Right. So I don't know necessarily if it was a 0-for-0 offer straight up or what the details of it were. But it was proof that Trump's plan worked. By raising those tariffs, he had countries come to the table to offer, let's take this for truth, a 0-for-0 trade deal. That's proof that Trump's strategy was working, because America is the greatest economic engine in the world, in my opinion. And any hurt that a tariff would put on our economy would be felt a lot more on everyone else out there. Why do you think global markets dropped that much and U.S.'s drop was tolerable? For the world economy, they were worried about a global recession. Trump was the one making the actions. Everyone else was reacting to it. Even now, Trump says we're going to put a stay on them. the market rebounded. Everyone else is on the back foot. Trump is the one steering the ship here. Let's go to the next sentence. I'll give you a chance to comment on that as well. It's a global tariff rate of 10% when it was closer to 2% when he took office. Is that accurate?
I don't know. No. Well, it's a global tariff rate that we're going to charge everybody bare minimum 10% to gain access to our market, right? But my question is this, Gene. If tariffs are bad and they destroy economies, then why does every country on the planet charge the United States a greater tariff rate than us, including our friends, the Europeans, the Australians? They all have higher tariffs against us than we have against them. If they're so bad and they destroy economies, then why are they doing it to us?
Because they are taking advantage of the global marketplace. Because we've all decided to become a global economy at some point, starting from the 90s and moving forward, the U.S. has allowed a lot of our business, a lot of our industry to leave our country and go to these other places that were being offered more attractive tax rates in some respects, or lower costs of doing business, or cheaper labor, or whatever the case may be, and then charged us to get those goods and services back here. And I think what Trump is doing is trying to reset that globalization that hurt our manufacturing. Why do you think auto and aluminum and steel love tariffs? Because they're now competitive again in their own country. That's why they want those tariffs. And it'll keep producers and maybe even bring producers into America so they can avoid those tariffs.
And you kind of touched on some of the things that are like that cause companies to leave the United States to manufacture their goods in other countries and then send them back here and sell them here, right? Lower wages and stuff like that. So you have to ask yourself the question, like, why are these companies leaving? Well, they're making their T-shirts in China and everything else in your house basically made in China because they have slave labor, like you had mentioned, right? So how do you compensate for that and stay competitive in a free and fair market? Is it a free and fair market when we have unions that demand, and I'm not saying this is wrong, demand a living wage for our workers, a middle-class living wage with benefits? The government tells them they have to have health insurance, they have to pay into Social Security. There's a bunch of stuff that we require companies to do here that other countries don't. So when a company is faced with trying to cut costs, they ship their factory to another country and then sell it back here. So is it wrong to charge them a 10% off the top tariff to send their goods back here to access to our market where our companies are paying people living wages? No, it's not. Right? I think 10% is very fair, and anyone who charges us more, I'm with Trump. It's got to be reciprocal.
Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So the next question from the commenter is, or the next comment I should say from the commenter, is that tariffs are just a huge tax increase on Americans without action from Congress, and going with taxation without representation argument. And to this, I say, what? What ends up happening with a tariff is that the source of the goods and services would change. Instead of getting the goods from overseas, it'll come from domestic production. If you have tariffs overseas on our goods that are exorbitant, and now the other goods aren't coming here, the market has grown for our domestic products to stay domestically here. If we're not getting cars from Japan or from Mexico, let's say, because that's where one of the production places are, then you're going to get cars from American builders, even American builders that are owned by countries outside of us, right? So I'm trying to understand, how is this a tax increase when what this does is really just a substitution of one's goods versus another's goods?
So a couple of points there I just want to hit. One, the 10% across the board. At first, I wanted a little more information on it, and then Trump kind of did, or one of Trump's people explained this pretty well. I think it was Bassett. Let's say Zimbabwe, because they're a developing nation, we charge them 0. China then opens a factory in Zimbabwe and uses them as a pass-through to ship their goods to the United States. So they had to make it 10% across the board to ensure no one cheats at the tariffs. The second piece about the taxes part, left of center people, and even some on the Republican side, I don't understand this. You'll hear them say things. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. You'll hear them say things like the corporate tax in the United States is too low. We need to raise that. The capital gains tax in the United States is too low. We need to raise that. Big corporations need to pay their fair share. They say things like that. A tariff is, in effect, it is a tax. It's a tax on a foreign corporation, right? Why do Democrats and rhinos support raising taxes on American companies, but not on foreign companies?
Interesting. Yes, provocative.
Someone needs to explain that one to me.
It's the 80-20 that we've been talking about for weeks and months here on the show. Just skipping down in the comment here, why would any business want to invest in the USA right now under such a cloud of uncertainty? Well, there's choices here, right? So one of the choices would be, if you want to avoid the tariffs, then you invest in America. You bring your production here. That's one way. Or, alternatively, if you want American investment to grow, then this protectionism of certain industries would help, because the tariff would then encourage those who are receiving the benefit of the tariff to increase their own work product here and invest more in America. So you even get investment from one way or investment from the other way.
But
pretty simple to me.
Yeah, but I don't even understand the point of that question, though.
Exactly. Yes.
The point of the tariff, it would be, Trump says this, but it's not really the totally desired outcome to have foreign companies all of a sudden start building stuff in America. That's why I said, the tariffs thing is kind of an all of the above with what Trump is trying to do. Yes, it'll be nice if some companies start investing in America and building their factories here. It will also be nice if foreign countries lower their tariffs to the rate we're charging them, or we make a deal with them, we charge zero each way, and they don't cheat by going through a pass-through country, right? And then Americans' goods and services that they're buying from overseas, the prices would actually go down, right? Without them investing in the United States, they would just be selling products here that aren't tariffed, and theoretically it would go down. So there's lots of things that tariffs can do besides being used as leverage for other things, like the bad actors you were talking about. And Trump was teasing that maybe China will make a deal with TikTok because we can lower tariffs, right? It gives them some leverage there. But sometimes it truly is just about the tariffs. It's not always about those other things.
Right. And the other thing that we're also missing out on here, pal, is it's not, the economic policy is not just tariffs. It's tariffs plus other things in the economy. For instance, we're going to be talking about this on another show, but Chris Matthews was having a heart attack over lumber. And where are we going to get our lumber from? He clearly has been to Alaska to see how many trees there are there. So it's not just a tariff on lumber from Canada. It's a tariff on lumber from Canada plus an executive order for the government to do all it can to encourage and support our domestic lumber industry. It's not just a tariff on the European Union. It's finding savings in USAID that will then take the place of any lost revenue from any loss of business as a result of a tariff. It's a balancing act of many different things, of income revenue streams and expenditures that goes along with the tariffs that make them tolerable for the economy.
Yes. And, I hit on some of these before, but I just want to run through them again or add to them. So you mentioned one of them, right? Part of the purpose of a tariff is to raise revenue for the government that's charging it. Another thing is to protect an industry within their own country, like steel, which you kind of need for the military. Lumber would be another good one, right? To build houses, right? So protecting some domestic businesses. And then you have to hedge against, and I mentioned some of these before, that we pay higher pay rates in this country than a lot of other countries, right? How do you compete fairly with a foreign company that's paying slave wages in a lot of instances? How do you compete with foreign countries like China does this because they gain monopolies in certain areas by subsidizing industries at exorbitant rates? We flirt with that idea here too sometimes. But if you subsidize an industry where if it was left to the free market, they would go out of business, but the government's paying more than half the weight, it winds up putting the American company that was competing with it out of business. So how do you compensate for that? You might have to charge a tariff equal to the amount that the government is subsidizing that industry in that foreign country. And then there's a few other things that, Europe has a value-added tax. It's sort of like a federal sales tax. That greatly impacts the cost of things that we ship there to sell. A lot of countries also have rules that are not conducive to the United States doing business there, like China. China, when you open a company in China, they have to have a 51% stake in the business. So they automatically basically own your business when you send it there. You can't sue in Chinese courts if you're not a Chinese citizen. Intellectual property, they don't follow any of the rules with that. They steal it all and then they make knockoffs and sell them back to us. And then the last one, in a place like Mexico, foreigners are not allowed to own land there. So go ahead and try to open a business. You have to rent, possibly from the government, and pay exorbitant fees there too. So they have all these rules set up to make American businesses fail. The only way to sort of equalize that playing field is to charge the tariff on them. You have to until they fix theirs.
And by the way, I know we mentioned a lot of that already, but here's one thing we haven't mentioned. Access to our market. Is there a reason why we should allow a bad actor like China to have unfettered access to our market, to our economy, to our consumer base? Or yes, we get the benefit of cheaper prices, but that's really living off of slave labor, which a lot of people on the left they seem to forget that they're doing every time they use their iPhone. But in all honesty, shouldn't there be, like we said earlier, a cover charge, an entrance fee to have access to the people who are powering the greatest economic engine known to man? I mean, isn't that only fair that the house should get a cover?
I mean, Gene, you can sell items on your front lawn. You might have some implications with the government that might harass you. But if you wanted to open up a stand in a flea market, you got to pay for a booth, right? You want access to that market, you got to pay, right? And we don't want to make it exorbitant because then eventually prices could go up here. But a 10% charge on a country that's making over a 90% profit margin, that's not a problem.
And honestly, when you think about it, moving your business and investing in the U.S. is the same thing as a cover charge. And we're only collecting half the covers at the door. Those that are here and are investing in infrastructure, hiring Americans, paying them, paying sales taxes, paying income taxes in certain cases. Obviously there are loopholes to get around all that. But spending money here in order to make money here, yet those from outside expect to get free entry and to block us when we look for the same. I mean, when I heard about a Canadian tariff on dairy that was criminal, in my opinion, at how high it was, I'm saying to myself, how do we let it get this far? And the answer is, honestly, and this sounds like a buzzword we're going to say, but globalists. We've been trying to build a global economy because we thought sort of a Gallowayism here that a rising tide lifts all boats. It hasn't seemed to work that way because you still have bad actors not playing by the rules, among other things, among value-added taxes, among high rates when you enter a market or you want to, or they require you to invest in that country or whatever the case may be. All the other barriers of entry that are out there. Why is it rules for us but not for anybody else? The answer is because they know that we can afford it. And that's what makes the Trump plan and his approach to this genius. He's saying, we're cutting off the gravy train for you guys. You've had an advantage for 30 years, and now it's time for that advantage to go away.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
Trump is saying that it's time to shift the paradigm, and it's not about the issuance of a tariff. It's using tariffs in a certain way to convey your message and to gain the biggest advantage you can possible in this realignment that Trump wants to do.
Yep. And I'd say, number one, most people probably still, but definitely 2 weeks ago, had no idea what a tariff was. It's something they mentioned in like 7th grade history class, and they forgot all about it. They don't know what they are. They don't know what they're for. Most people don't know what they are. When they figured out what they were, the ones that did, most of them were shocked, because I was, at the tariff rates that are being imposed on the United States. I had no idea some of them were that far out of control, because even the Republicans for decades now have been touting free and fair trade. That's the way to go. It hasn't been free and fair.
No, it
You
hasn't.
had mentioned something else about these other countries selling into our markets, and it's because we're rich and we can afford it. It's funny because I was thinking about this earlier today. One of the arguments is like these developing countries, or especially after World War II, Europe was destroyed. Let's lower tariffs, allow them to export into the United States at low cost or no cost, free and fair trade, a rising tide will lift all boats, right? But then I started thinking about, so what has the United States been doing over the last 50 years plus? We print money, we go into debt, while other countries are fleecing us, and many of those countries are buying our debt. We owe China about $5 trillion out of our massive 30-some-odd trillion dollar deficit, right? That is completely insane that a developing country owns over $5 trillion of our debt. They got a stranglehold on us.
Right. So we need to start doing some debt service. And the way we do debt service is to make more disposable income for everybody to spend more, so we can collect more taxes and we can raise more income from everyone. And if we're not looking at a revenue stream from outside the country to that end, then are we just going to keep on going further and further into debt? What is that the plan? What is the alternative? Is it what I'm asking, kind of? What else can be done instead of raising taxes on hardworking Americans? And the whole idea of the millionaires and the billionaires that they want to think is, going to be this panacea for raising more and more money, bilk them till they're dry.
I'm the last registered Democrat. Tax and spend! Tax and spend!
What is the plan? What is the alternative to what Trump is doing here?
Yeah, I mean, Gene, either we protect manufacturing and our industries here in some way, shape, or form, or we'll all be working at Walmart or Starbucks selling Chinese-made goods. Like, that is the alternative, right? If we don't produce things here and we just consume things from other countries, that's the alternative.
If you like that clip from our new show, Behind Enemy Lines, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other shows, and tune in live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.